Here is the voice of the working class, Rick Smith.
And welcome, brothers, sisters, working class heroes. This is the Rick Smith Show. Thanks so much for being here today on the big program. Lots to get to, lots to talk about. Crazy pack over the weekend. A little disappointed with Trump's spiel. I thought some time off would give him a chance to work on some new material. He'd have some mirror time, maybe some better positioning, some better punchlines. Very tired old routine. It was one of those things where, if you went to go see a comedian and it was the same over and over and over and over again, and you could recite the jokes better than he could, that's kind of what Trump's speech on Sunday was really about. And it's one of those weird moments where I'm going, wow, I mean, I didn't need to watch it. I could have done it. I thought there'd be some new grievances, some new things to play the victim about. No, same old shtick. Interesting, though, 55% of the folks at the PAC, at the Crazy PAC, would vote for him to be president next time around, want him to be the guy. 21% want Ron DeSantis, the governor of Florida. So, could there be some kind of, infighting going on there? The point of the spiel, though, was very apparent at the end, all about money. Go to his website, send him money. He's got legal problems. It is what it is. He's got legal problems. He needs your money. He needs your money. And we'll talk a little bit about that. Not much. I'm kind of done with Trump, and I'll be honest. In watching his speech, I just went. I'm so grateful that I don't have to hear this every day. That I was kind of looking forward to this speech. I thought he'd have some free time on the golf course to dream some new stuff up, some new grievances. Maybe there's sand in his golf cart. I don't know. Nothing new. Same old. Same old Trump wanted to take credit for everything, and nothing was his fault simultaneously. Anyway, some good news. Some good news on the vaccination rates, and some good news on the number of infections. Seems we've stabled off. Seems that they're going to be, what is it? I guess over 17 million doses will be shipped out across the U.S. this week, which means we're getting more people. I guess there were 10 million last week. I mean, we're moving in the right direction, and we're going to, if things stay on track, we're going to hit Biden's number in the first 100 days, and that's a good thing. Now, I'm hoping that they're right, that 80% of the country could reach the immunity stage by midsummer. That would be a good thing. Be a really good thing. Problem is, I'm driving home today, and I hear on the radio that Pennsylvania Governor Tom Wolf is lifting restrictions. We're going to allow more indoor stuff. We're going to, out-of-state travel. You don't have to worry about it anymore. Go on, you're fine. We're right at this moment, and we did this the last time. This is my frustration point. We did this the last time where, we were getting to the point to where, just a little longer. We could just hold out. Just a bit. Maybe we won't hit another surge. Now they're talking like a fourth surge coming, another variant that they're tracking, and at a moment where we just have a little bit longer to hold on. Just hang out a bit longer before we can get the vaccines rolled out and all this. Now the CDC director is saying, "Hey, whoa! Don't get too crazy. Don't get carried away. We're almost there. We're almost out of the woods." We're almost to the other side. And I guess, look, I'm as much as anyone. I want to be able to go back to normal. I want to go back to doing things. On Saturday night, I was talking to my wife and I said, did you know the movie theater is open? They got the movie theater open. Not that I was going to say, hey, let's go, but I do want to go. We used to love going to movies. I'm at this point where let's hold off. Let's wait till we get to somewhere near reasonable, something. But the fact that it's open is one of these things you go, bit soon? No. I get that you can socially distance and all of that. I get it. But we're so close. And still the numbers are much higher than they were when we initially shut down. I think the numbers I saw are like 70,000 people a day are being infected, and we're 1,100 people dying a day. So we've come down off the peak, and the worst thing, and again, I guess my problem is I've got a really smart listener who sends me his models, and he has not been wrong. Who keeps saying, end of March, we're going to get this tick up, and this is the wrong time to be beginning this right before the expected tick up. So I guess where I'm going with this is calm down, be safe, wash your hands, wear your mask, socially distance, do that stuff. We're going to get there. Trust me, going to get there. Big news today, Elizabeth Warren, whom I'm very happy she is still in the Senate. Which is where I wanted her. She came out today with the Ultra Millionaires Tax Act. And this is what she's been talking about for a while, the idea that we're going to ask the very wealthy in this country to contribute. Her piece of legislation would require households with net worths of more than $50 million to pay a 2% wealth tax every year. And for those who exceed $1 billion, you would have to pay 3%. And I'll be honest, the 50 million, I would like to have seen another jump somewhere around 250, 500, and then the billion, and maybe a tick more in the billion. But they say Jeff Bezos, the now again richest man in the world, he'd have to cover another $5.4 billion in 2021. Elon Musk could pay $5.2 billion in 2021. Gates, $4 billion. Zuckerberg, $2.9 billion. Overall, the very wealthy folks in the country, they're saying over the next decade, they could come up with somewhere, our 1,000 billionaires, because we now have 1,000 billionaires. I mean, it was a handful back in the 80s. There were like 3, I think. And then there were, like 300. And then there were 400 because we have the Forbes 400. And then there were like 600. And now there are 1,000. But according to Emmanuel Saez and Gabriel Zuckerman, $3 trillion could be gained over the next decade to help us fund things like, I don't know, roads and bridges and all kinds of stuff. We could do a lot with $3 trillion. And this is one of those moments where you go, this is the kind of stuff that we need. We need, and I've been saying this for decades now, we need a tax code, much like the good socialist president Dwight David Eisenhower. We need a lot of the policies that Ike had back in the 50s. We need strong labor law, and we need high taxes on the very well-to-do. It's pretty simple. It worked, and it will work again. And I know what people are saying, but Rick, all the rich people, they have the means. They'll leave or they'll avoid paying taxes. And we'll start with the avoiding one. I think in the coming months, we're going to see what happens to somebody who avoids paying taxes. I think what they've got on Trump is going to be the test case for someone going to jail for tax avoidance. Going to be interesting to see how that plays out. But the other side of it is people, they'll just leave. They'll leave the country. They'll go to Russia. And part of me goes, good, bye. But according to Elizabeth Warren's bill, not before they tax you at 40% with a 40% exit tax. That's pretty steep. And it's understand where we used to be. When you start talking about how things used to be, because we like to idealize the past. things were much better back in the old days. When Ike was president, we had a top marginal tax rate of 92%. If you made $1.6 million in today's money back then, they taxed you at 92%. That dollar over 1.6 million was taxed at 92%. Now understand, nobody paid that tax rate. They donated to charities. They built universities. They built hospitals. They used their money in ways to, avoid paying the taxes. They paid their workers. They did a lot of things a little bit differently. And then as you kept cutting taxes, because you know what, tax cuts are going to create jobs, we're told. And what all tax cuts really did was create 1,000 billionaires. And we've done a nice job of that. Congratulations. We now have over 1,000 billionaires. Now, they say that this tax will capture about 13% of the gain that they got pandemic till now. Now, there are those who are saying that our heavy top folks pocketed $1 trillion. That's a pretty sizable chunk of revenue. So for me, this is a good start. Now, understand, and I do fully understand this, there is not a snowball's chance in hell of this thing passing. There's not. Because the wealth class of this country has a death grip around the throats of our politics. And you're not going to get the ability to push this through. But it's a conversation we have to have. We have to have these redistributive conversations. High taxes being part of it. Unions being the other part of it. And on Sunday, Joe Biden did something that, mind blown. He did something that, far cry from what the last guy would have done. And, the guy before him didn't do it. Come to think about it, the guy before him wouldn't have done it. And the guy before him didn't do it. And the guy before him certainly wouldn't have done it. And the guy before him really, really, really wouldn't have done it. So I was thrilled to see Joe Biden. Joe Biden came out and had a little 2-minute video, 2 minutes of why he would support why he'd support the unions, and I gotta play his audio here. Here's Joe Biden.
I've long said America wasn't built by Wall Street. It was built by the middle class, and unions built the middle class. Unions put power in the hands of workers. They level the playing field. They give you a stronger voice for your health, your safety, higher wages, protections from racial discrimination and sexual harassment. Unions lift up workers, both union and non-union, and especially black and brown workers. I've made it clear when I was running that my administration's policy would be to support unions organizing and the right to collectively bargain. I'm keeping that promise. You should all remember, the National Labor Relations Act didn't just say that unions are allowed to exist. It said that we should encourage unions. So let me be really clear. It's not up to me to decide whether anyone should join a union. But let me be even more clear. It's not up to an employer to decide that either. The choice to join a union is up to the workers. Full stop. Full stop. Today and over the next few days and weeks, workers in Alabama and all across America are voting on whether to organize a union in their workplace. This is vitally important, a vitally important choice as America grapples with the deadly pandemic, the economic crisis, and the reckoning on race. What it reveals the deep disparities that still exist in our country. And there should be no intimidation, no coercion, no threats, no anti-union propaganda. No supervisors should confront employees about their union preferences. You know, every worker should have a free and fair choice to join a union. The law guarantees that choice. And it's your right, not that of an employer. It's your right. No employer can take that right away. So make your voice heard. God bless you all, and may God protect the workers and their families who are trying to figure out how to make it fairly. Thank you.
I got to be honest, that's why I voted for Joe Biden right there. I go back to during the election and, my union brothers and sisters go, why would you vote for Joe Biden? That right there is the reason I voted for Joe Biden. Without question. That statement hasn't been said by a president in my lifetime. Let that sink in. In my lifetime, no president has taken that kind of a stance while in the Oval Office. And for me, this is that moment where the chips are down and the organizing has to happen, and we have to step up and seize this moment. That for the first time in my lifetime, there's actually a president in the White House who is encouraging people to get together to fight for better wages, hours, conditions, all of those things that my grandparents' generation fought for. So this to me was exciting. And the juxtaposition of Trump and his grievances on Sunday and then Joe Biden coming out with this, there isn't for me a choice. And there shouldn't be for any working person a choice on who they're going to support. Because at the end of this, for me, it all goes back down to James Carville. As much as I'm not a fan, he was right. It's the economy, stupid. It's how are you going to get people jobs that are going to be able to support their lives? And the biggest part of that is having bargaining power in the workplace. So thrilled to see Joe Biden come out and say that. Thrilled to see that his administration is moving to act on it. And thrilled by the fact that, look, he did it in a moment of consequence. He did it in a moment when maybe there is some influence there to where those people in Bessemer, Alabama go, you know what? We've got a White House that's standing behind this. Because this is how we close the massive inequality gap we have in this country. This is how we level the playing field. This is how you make the richest man in the world accountable for his workforce. How did he get to be the richest man in the world? That's right, his workforce. The people who show up every day and move the boxes and pick the orders and drive the trucks and all of those things. They deserve a fair share of the wealth that their labor creates. And look, I hope by the end of the month we find out that the workers in Bessemer, Alabama have voted yes, and we begin to organize that industry. I got a lot to get to. Going to take a quick break. Right back.
Nothing more American than workers standing up, and the union gives a voice to win. On the Rick Smith Show.
I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1936. That was the day Hoover Dam was formally turned over to the federal government. It was a massive undertaking. Approved by the Coolidge administration in 1928, work began to divert and then dam the Colorado River in 1931, creating Lake Mead. Thousands of unemployed flocked to the area in search of jobs. More than 21,000 were employed over the course of 5 years, with as many as 5,200 working on any given day. Workers were paid on average of 50 cents an hour, with higher pay for skilled work. Governmental hiring terms included preference to veterans and no hiring of Asians. The Colored Citizens Labor and Protective Association of Las Vegas protested de facto hiring discrimination against blacks. Their eventual representation among the employed totaled an estimated 24 to 30 for the duration of the project. A few Native Americans were hired as high scalers to remove loose rock with jackhammers and dynamite. Estimated fatalities ranged from 96 to over 150. Many died from falls, heat-related illnesses, falling debris, heavy equipment, and carbon monoxide poisoning from tunnel work. The project was rocked by at least 2 documented strikes. The industrial workers of the world attempted to organize there. Workers struck over wage cuts and working conditions. They repeatedly demanded flushing toilets and cold, clean running water, especially in temperatures as high as 120 degrees in the summertime. At the time the Hoover Dam was turned over to the federal government, it was the tallest dam and the largest hydroelectric station in the country. It currently generates about 4 billion kilowatt hours of hydroelectric power for Nevada, Arizona, and California. Like what you hear? Check out more at laborhistoryin2.com.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
So poor Sidney Powell. Gotta be honest, I almost feel sorry. No, I don't. Never mind. I'm not gonna go to the feel sorry part. I think they're gonna deserve everything they get in court. But poor Sidney Powell again today, lost in court again. And I know there's a lot of losing going on here, but she's still got some residual cases that still have to be lost. Today, the Supreme Court tossed out 2 of their petitions, I guess, that they had filed in lower courts in Arizona and Wisconsin. So again, another loss for them. And there'll be more, trust me, especially when Dominion and the other voting machine company gets a hold of them. Going to be a lot of poor people. Anyway, this past weekend, Crazy Pack. I hope everyone didn't bother to watch it. I watched a little bit. I watched as much as I could stomach. But here to share some thoughts on this year's Conservative Political Action Committee shindig. I've asked our good friend Jared Yates Sexton to come talk with us. Jared is author of the book American Rule: How a Nation Conquered the World but Failed Its People. Also the fabulous host of the Muckrake podcast. Jared, thanks for taking time for us.
Hey, thanks for having me, Rick.
So let's start with the golden Buddha, the golden calf, the Bob's Big Boy character. What was that? And how do I get a copy of it?
I tell you what, we were recording the new Muckrake today, and we were trying to figure out if we could raise the money to actually buy it ourselves. The rumor on the streets, it was a cool $100,000. And to buy a piece of history. I think it was incredible. Not only was the golden Trump statue the perfect sacrilegious idol, but I think it is the perfect embodiment of the incoherent, absolutely insane madness of the Republican Party. It made no sense whatsoever. It looked like it was thrown together at the last second to be all things to all different people. It was just absolutely incoherent and disturbing. If you ask me, that's going to be giving me nightmares for a few weeks.
I mean, the only way they could have made it better or more outrageous if they would have made a fountain out of him like peeing on something. I mean, that's the only way it could have gotten any better. That's where they were getting their drink from. Maybe that would have been better.
You know what I really enjoyed? I don't know if you noticed this, but he was over an hour late to his own speech. Right. And I really enjoyed all the geeks around him who had to come out on stage and be like, hey, this is completely according to plan, just to let everyone know, like he's not late at all. Like the way that he leaves his supporters to, die of hypothermia in, sub-zero temperatures, take their money, can't even get excited about giving the speech. I mean, it is a terribly abusive, codependent relationship all the way around.
No kidding. But here's the thing, as I watched it, and I said at the beginning, it's like a comedian who hasn't bothered updating his material. It was the same tired routine. I think I could have done a better job, a little more energy, delivered the punchline with a little more zip. He wasn't on his game. Maybe get a couple of mulligans on the 18th hole before he came to the speech.
You know what's amazing with that, Rick, is if you really look at how politics works, this was more or less his time to shine, to come out after his presidency, to possibly set up another run at the presidency. He doesn't seem interested in that, to be honest. It feels like he just wants to be adored and sort of fawned over. But it's really obvious that this person who is completely untalented, uninterested, and just checked out most of the time, and they're treating him like a religious idol. You know what I mean? And they've completely sold every principle that they've ever espoused or ever said that they believed in. They've completely given over all of their integrity, all of it that was left. And for this guy who can't even be bothered to get up for their conference.
Yeah, I mean, it was quite scary because here's the thing. this is his party. I mean, the Republican Party is the party of Trump. There are no ideas. There's no direction. And everyone's scared to death of this guy who's unhinged. I mean, he's still going after everything was stolen. It was a huge ripoff. All the voter fraud that we know it was there. And I'm going, come on, update it a little bit. Give me something.
We were talking about before we started going on the air, like CPAC has been crazy for a while, but at least at CPAC, you would occasionally hear ideas,
right?
They, and by the way, terrible ideas, the worst ideas. You'd have people that come out and talk about like reverse taxes, or deregulating the entire economy, or, bringing chimney sweeps back into, the mix. But what we actually saw this time was there's no ideology. There's actually literally no platform. There are no ideas beyond wealthy, rich, influential people wondering why they don't get more likes on Instagram and Twitter. And then on top of it, decrying socialism, reform of any type. And the only actual plans that they made at CPAC this year was how to disenfranchise voters.
Right.
That's literally the only topic that they actually discussed how to even address to begin with.
And the other successful thing they did, they brought an old Nazi symbol back to create their stage.
I mean, and by the way, it wasn't just any Nazi symbol. Like, that was a deep cut. Like, somebody had to really go back. I actually did a little bit of research on that particular Nazi rune. By the way, don't you love it when you get to talk about Nazi runes based on political conferences? That is the Odal, Rick, and it stands for heritage, which I'm sure made everybody at the CPAC conference feel really good about. So, somebody got their pay for that. Somebody earned their money.
Now, I had a couple of people tell me, "Oh, come on, you're reaching. They didn't mean that." And look, I put out a tweet yesterday or the other day, and I said, "Look, you know what? I think I'm going to give them a pass on this." Because they don't know their history. I'm sure that they didn't know exactly what they were putting out there for the people who are the white supremacists. I'm sure they didn't know any better. Cut them some slack.
I tell you what, with Steve Bannon sliming his way behind the scenes, I mean, that's his gig.
Yeah.
That's what he loves. I mean, like, if you get Bannon on a good night after a bender, I mean, he's going to talk about Nazi runes all night long. This esoteric garbage is all they're obsessed with, and they're all about this symbology and symbolism, which is important, particularly when you have a conference that is based around a golden sacrilegious idol of a failed president. But yeah, this whole thing, there were a lot of, let's just say, quote unquote, coincidences to it.
But those have always been there. They've always been under the surface. I used to joke. I think a lot of people joked about Pat Buchanan and his original speeches being better in German. I mean, that's how far we're going back in this. But now they're just here we are.
I've always been a fan of these old stories about when William F. Buckley would get one too many gin and tonics in him, and he would just start letting the slurs and, anti-Semitic conspiracy theories fly. That used to be reserved for the hotel bar after the conference,
right.
And now they're pulling out chairs and stools and just letting it go free and everywhere. But you have to point out, these were the luminaries of the Republican Party. These were the leaders of the Republican Party. And not only did they come out and just speak in absolute gibberish and advocate for disenfranchising voters, they peddled one big lie and conspiracy theory after another. They have totally embraced Trumpism, and they have totally embraced QAnonism. There is no daylight whatsoever between the Republican Party and that conspiratorial fascistic nonsense.
But the scary thing about it is they're well-funded.
Yep.
They've got tons of media outlets who have huge followings,
yep.
and the left doesn't. The left hasn't figured out how to compete, because I had an interesting discussion with Joe Walsh, the Tea Party former congressman from Illinois, and we agree we can't go back to the fairness doctrine. We can't. It's just the left's going to have to figure out how to compete. We have to figure out how to compete in those spaces for the sane hearts and minds, if there are any left. And look, I think we're at a moment where there are some people looking at the Republican Party going, but the left's got to stop being crazy too.
Well, I would say first and foremost, I think the left has to point out what this is. They have to stop treating this like it's politics as usual, or that it's been politics as usual for decades. I mean, the Republican Party has been a puppet of the wealthy and the powerful of this country for decades. And, we're sitting here talking about the fact that there weren't any panels or discussions of policy or actual movement or principles. That was up in the penthouse. That was up a couple of flights because that's where the real power and the influence was actually happening. Ted Cruz and Howley and Trump, all these people are sideshow spectacles. And the left has to point that out. They can't participate in this nonsense anymore. And they need to point out that this is an actual dangerous thing that is happening and that these people are being used as a front for people who are hollowing out the country and selling it off for spare parts.
No, you're absolutely right. And it's the political theater that was that whole show. And I got to watch some of it, and I watched Ted Cruz do his little song and dance and attacking AOC, and I'm going, I'm sorry. Explain why you, the guy who fled the country, while your constituents were freezing to death, why you're attacking the person who was actually trying to help you. Explain that, because I'm struggling.
Well, I just want to point out that when they did the CPAC straw poll, Ted Cruz was fifth.
Yeah.
He was still gaining a large amount of votes and support for President of the United States of America after he abandoned his constituents to die in their homes and go look for food in dumpsters. The whole point, though, is it's a matter of, quote unquote, triggering the libs. It's whoever upsets the left. Like, if you actually look at that CPAC straw poll, of course, Trump is at the top. But there's DeSantis, who sacrificed his entire state to the coronavirus and didn't even bother to help anyone. I mean, they really have no other principles beyond the pursuit of power and upsetting their enemies or oppressing their enemies. That's all they care about at this point.
No, it's absolutely crazy. And this is where I'm hoping Joe Biden keeps us on this sane path that we're on. Because I'll be honest, I listened to Donald Trump speak, was actually looking forward to it in some weird kind of sadistic way. Because I thought there'd be new material. I thought he'd put a little effort into it, like you said. And then I realized quickly, I am so grateful that I don't have to hear his voice every day.
I tell you what, it is really, really odd because every time Trump comes back or there's some sort of statement that leaks, I am just so shocked at how my body is just recoiling from it. And, remembering this past trauma of having to listen to this lying buffoon for years. Yeah, it feels really, really different. And to watch him get up there, stumble through it, have no idea what he's talking about. And again, he's already lost miles off his fastball, Rick. I mean, to watch him up there, it felt like such a weird blast from the past, but it felt good to turn him off. I'll tell you that.
Now today you see the what came out of France. Evidently, Nicolas Sarkozy was found guilty of corruption and influence peddling, sentenced to 3 years in prison. He's actually going to serve a year of them. I got to be honest, that gave me hope that possibly your state of Georgia could possibly look into the influencing that went on there. The state of New York could look into the tax evasion there, that maybe someday down the road we see Donald in an orange jumpsuit and a guest of the state at the Gray Bar Hotel.
I like to let people know where I stand on the issues. I am pro-criminal politicians serving time for their crimes and being held accountable. I was so happy about that, and I wish that we would pick up that baton and run with it. But I will also tell you, from the state of Georgia, they did not take kindly to Donald Trump trying to interfere with the elections in here, or sicking his fascist goons on them after they refused to let him do it. There is a real possibility that he's going to face some repercussions for what he did down in Georgia, because this state is not really pleased with what he did. And on top of that, we have a governor who he has already made his sworn enemy. So, I mean, things could get really weird really quickly down here.
No, I'm actually, that's where I'm looking for the most action, because as you pointed out, he threw Kemp under the bus after Kemp came out in favor of him and did a whole bunch of stuff, and then Trump just tossed him, and then all of the attacks and all of the nonsense. It's going to be interesting. You mentioned the word baton, and it got me to thinking about the golden doll again. which I wish they would make into bobbleheads. I'm hoping someone will make a bobblehead version of that. But wasn't he holding some kind of scepter or some kind of magic wand or some kind of crazy thing?
Yeah, no, it was a complete mess. So up top, he was wearing a suit. Down low, he was wearing American bathing trunks. Then in one hand, he had the Constitution, in the other hand, a wand, which, if you ask me, is all the disparate, bizarre, completely incoherent parts of Republican belief, that he's some sort of magician who made everything possible and was able to just use a little wand to just make their dreams come true. It's just the most bizarre display I think I've ever seen, honestly.
So before we wrap this up, I got to look at this, and I'm hoping that I'm hoping that there are still some sane, rational Republicans who looked at that and go, we got to move away from that.
I wish that were true. Listen, I'm a realist and a little bit of a pessimist at times, but even I thought they were going to move away from the coup. I thought at least they'd move away from the Capitol coup and be like, "Ugh, I don't think this is who we are." They embraced it. They just held it close and gave it a wet, sloppy kiss. I mean, there is just nothing that they're going to refuse to eat.
Yeah, and they're in the process of rewriting it. I mean, to be honest, they're in the process of rewriting it. It wasn't a coup. They were invited in.
Oh, it was Antifa. What are you talking about, Rick? I mean, they came in, they wore the hats and everything.
So is there any way back? I mean, you're somebody I look to for hope. Is there any way back?
Yeah, no, there is. And it goes back to what we talk about a lot of the time. The Democrats just have to stop engaging with these people. They need to call them the absurd, dangerous group that they are and deal with the material conditions of Americans who haven't even been served by them. I mean, it's all lip service. It's all symbolism. There's nothing to Trump's faux populism or what the Republican Party has done. They have just absolutely robbed the working class of America blind. And so if they could actually deal with the material conditions and the things going on in their lives, I think the Democrats and the left and unions could actually find their footing again. I do have hope about that.
No, I mean, for me, and then it comes to this rescue plan as a first step, and then we need a massive infrastructure bill to get people back to work. So there's a lot we need to be doing, and we need to be doing it quickly. Which is why I'm still hoping that the Democrats do come around and find their sense and do away with the filibuster, although I know it will not happen.
Yeah, I would love for that to happen. But just to reiterate something I said, I think the last time I was on this show, if you want middle America, if you want Republican voters in middle America to believe that climate change is a problem, put alternative energy manufacturing in their backyard. And they'll believe in it real quick.
I'm right there with you.
There are options here. There are paths forward.
Those are jobs. I'm right there with you. Good stuff. As always, Jared, I appreciate the time. Great talking with you, my friend.
Thanks, buddy.
Our good friend Jared Yates Sexton. Make sure you pick up his book, How America Conquered the World but Failed Its People. We'll get links out on how you can do that. And check out his podcast, the Muckrake Podcast. Quick break. Right back. Stick around. You're listening to The Rick Smith Show.
Remembering that united we bargain, divided we beg. Rick Smith.
I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1900. That was the day the members of the Granite Cutters National Union walked out on strike. Their demands were improved wages and the 8-hour day. The leader of the strike was James Duncan, a Scottish granite cutter. Duncan had been elected granite cutter president in 1885. He was one of the founders of the American Federation of Labor. He served on the AFL's executive committee and was a close personal advisor of AFL President Samuel Gompers. Most of the granite cutters were located in cities on the East Coast. The union's first local was founded in Maine in 1877. Like many skilled trade unions of its day, under Duncan's leadership, the organization did not welcome black members. Duncan actively encouraged employers in the South to hire only white granite cutters. The strike of 1900 lasted until mid-May. It ended with a victory for the union, including the 8-hour workday for every local of granite cutters. Because their skills were often in high demand, tradecraft unions were sometimes able to win concessions from employers on matters of wages, hours, and working conditions. These victories by skilled craftsmen helped pave the way for the 8-hour workday to become the standard workday for all working people in the United States. The union also won a minimum wage standard and grievance procedure. In 1905, the Granite Cutters changed their name to the Granite Cutters International Union. During the 20th century, changes in technology changed the labor of granite cutting. Machines reduced the number of workers. In the 1920s, the union had more than 10,000 members. But by the late 1970s, it had dropped to less than 4,000 members. Labor History in 2 brought to you by the Illinois Labor History Society and The Rick Smith Show.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
So lots of exciting things, I think, coming in the coming weeks and months. Look, I think we get this rescue plan pushed through, get money into people's pockets. We then start looking at massive infrastructure spending, get people back to work, a good thing. But for me, Biden's speech on Sunday, the choice to join a union is up to the worker, full stop. That, to me, the punch of that whole speech. That we workers should have the right to join and form unions, and that the government will not be there to hinder that, but to actually encourage it. I think that is a major, major step in the right direction. And here to share some thoughts on, well, the future of labor in this country. I've asked Tim Driscoll to come talk with us. Tim is the president of the International Union of Bricklayers and Allied Craft Workers. Tim, thanks for taking time for us.
Yeah, thanks, Rick, and good evening to you.
Sunday, Joe Biden comes out with this great 2-minute video.
Phenomenal.
Throw it a little support behind the Amazon workers who are organizing. And I said earlier, look, this is the first time in my lifetime I've had a president come out and take that kind of stance that it's time to join unions.
Now, Rick, there's so much to hold up in what President Biden said last night about the value that unions bring to the American workplace. It's hard to identify just a single line, right? It's 2 minutes of the greatest words we've come out of the mouth of a president since Franklin Roosevelt. But what stood out for me was his straightforward statement that, unions lift up workers, both union and non-union. And that really cuts to the essential truth that he was stating, and one that I think the vast majority of Americans believe. In the most recent Gallup survey, 64% of Americans have a favorable view of unions, and that simply reflects the reality that they know unions bring to the workplace.
No, and look, the reality is as someone who's been a union member my entire working life, and I share my story with people every day, I think labor has not done a great job of touting their message. But I'll tell you, I think there's a moment coming right now where people are struggling because of this virus, where they're looking at employers who haven't taken their concerns to heart, and there's a moment right now where workers are looking for something, and this could be that moment of mass organizing, especially if we can get some legislation like the PRO Act or something to help encourage and make the process a little easier.
No, you couldn't have said it any more clearly. I mean, look, when workers' rights have been under attack in the Trump administration, we now have a president who's not afraid to say the word union. When he said the choice of a union is up to the workers, full stop, it doesn't get better than that. So we do need to build on that. We need to take all the administrative and legislative relief we can get and make sure everyone who wants the ability to join a union can do that. BAC couldn't agree more with that. It's time to give workers their voice back, and we're proud to be in this fight with Joe Biden on that.
Yeah, as I said from the beginning, day one, Joe Biden had done more for labor than any president that I remember. On day one, by 5 o'clock, when he fired Peter Robb, to me that was a wonderful moment. In one, you got rid of somebody who was really horrible general counsel of the NLRB, but also someone who symbolically was involved in the PATCO thing that began the heavy assault on organized labor during the Reagan years. So the symbolism and the act of cleaning up the NLRB for me was just a big part of it. And now seeing Eugene Scalia tossed to the curb and Boston Mayor Marty Walsh coming in, another huge moment.
Exactly, and he didn't stop with these surface level, efforts to clean up. After Rob was put out, his assistant went with him,
and not by choice.
Not by choice, no. But he welcomes that fight. I just can't say enough to see the President of the United States say the word union and know where you stand is everything. It's a sea change, and we've really got to take advantage of that here.
No, you're absolutely right. But, here's the thing. And I go back to President Obama, who didn't choke on the word union either, but in the moment that mattered, and I'll talk about Wisconsin. In that moment of, I'm sleeping on the marble floor in the Wisconsin Capitol while the uprising is going on. I was waiting for President Obama to get those comfortable shoes he was talking about and come out there walking with people. Didn't even mention it. So for me to have in this moment with the backdrop at Amazon, Joe Biden to take this moment, this is huge.
Absolutely. And it's not, look, given where we've been with Trump, this isn't just a reversal. This is an absolute tsunami of change that's coming on.
Yeah.
And I think we're going to be in a position to try and capitalize on that.
Well, let's talk about Marty Walsh, the mayor of Boston, LaUna guy, laborers guy. Other than, anyone could be better than a union-busting lawyer like Eugene Scalia. I look at Marty Walsh as somebody who I think will do a phenomenal job because he's fought every battle from top to bottom. He was a guy who carried a jelly bucket to work every day. I think he's going to understand what union members go through and try and make life better for those union members and for all workers.
No question. So while I didn't know or work with Marty, I hail from Boston myself. Started my apprenticeship in Boston in 1985. Marty's bona fides are long and deep. I mean, look, his qualifications are numerous. Certainly his leadership and administrative skills that he honed as mayor of Boston for the last 7 years were qualities that President Biden recognized in advancing his nomination. As mayor of a city that anchors probably the 8th largest metropolitan economy in the country and who's responsible for, a citywide staff of 18,000, clearly Marty's well prepared to direct the wide-ranging operations of DOL. His 16 years of service in the Mass House of Representatives and his leadership there speaks to his work. But to your point, and this is the most important one for me as part of Marty's resume, it's his deep and personal understanding of the challenges that workers face, right? And that comes from carrying a lunch bucket to work. It's grounded in his lived experience, first as a construction laborer and eventually heading up the Boston building trades. He knows from personal experience, both as the son of a union construction worker and then as a union laborer himself, the benefits that collective bargaining brings into the homes of millions of workers across our country. And he's going to take that with him to his leadership of the Department of Labor, and we're excited.
No, and look, we're in a very difficult time because, last number I saw, like 45% of the people that have jobs are in the gig economy right now. Things are changing. We need somebody who's going to be in the Department of Labor who are going to stand up for those workers. And look, we've got real challenges. We've got mass inequality that's going on. We've got employers who are really almost out of control when it comes to breaking unions. And the last 4 years, as you've pointed out, the pendulum has continued to swing further and further to the side of employer power. I'm hoping that Marty Walsh is able to bring some of that back to somewhere in the middle.
Yeah, and I think you're dead on with this whole notion of the gig economy because it's new and it's not really new, right? Because gig is just another word for an employer trying to put the onus of employment and everything that goes with it back on the worker. So if you take the values that I think Marty embraces, and that's, look, everyone has the right to come home from work safely, good wages for a hard day's work, health care for your family, and a secure and dignified retirement that pensions provide after a lifetime of hard work. There's no reason that can't come to the gig economy. It's just a question of imagination and commitment. And I think we're going to get that with Marty and his leadership. He knows that collective bargaining has been really the linchpin to this, and he'll bring that passion with him to the DOL. And again, bricklayers are excited to be in that fight with him.
Yeah, good stuff. You're listening to the Rick Smith Show here with Tim Driscoll, president of the International Union of Bricklayers and Allied Craft Workers. You might want to check out their website, bacweb.org, bacweb.org. We'll get links out on social media how you can check out the work that they do. One of the things that I'm thrilled about as well is, Ivanka had a little pet project. Ivanka wanted to give employers a whole bunch of little apprenticeship programs that they wanted to throw out and have cute little photo ops and all kinds of things like that. Wasn't much on job training, wasn't much on quality of job training. I saw it as an attack on the building trades, on unions like yours. I want to get your thoughts on, well, what her plan was and why we're happy it's gone.
Yeah, so you're referring to what the Trump administration had deemed the IRAPs, which was the industry-regulated apprenticeship programs. But let's cut to the quick. What they were employer-dominated, quote-unquote, apprenticeship that was going to allow employers to employ individuals at substandard wages and conditions and claim that in the guise of training, this was a way for folks to advance their career. We know for over 100 years, the building trades and others, the machinists, a number of unions, we've been involved with good employers, and there are good employers. Our signatory employers are our partners. We make sure that people get careers, not that they get these temporary stops at a employment agency as a way to cut costs. And yeah, Ivanka's pet project is gone, and that was also one of the early actions of the Biden administration, and it speaks volumes about his commitment to workers.
Now, in looking at this, because I'm a big supporter of apprenticeship programs, of union apprenticeship programs, because they have shown decades of quality. As where I look at the ABC contractors and their apprenticeship programs, they don't compare. This is one of those moments where I go, we did pass the WIOA during the Obama administration, the Workforce Innovation and Opportunity Act, I think it is, where it called for apprenticeship programs and to be building some of those. Do you see some of that maybe coming back? Do you see going forward the Biden administration, pushing for more types of apprenticeship programs to get other industries into what you guys have built?
I think so, and I think as long as it has that proper control and input from the workers, because that's half the equation. I mean, we recognize the role of employers, and we need for employers to recognize the role of, worker representatives. This isn't unique to the U.S. You look over to Europe and Germany, which was oddly enough touted by the Trump administration as a model. Their workers' councils, which are a form of union representation, were key components of any apprenticeship system. And I think if you stay true to that model, I think it could be expanded to all sorts of sectors of the economy, and we should look at that.
No, I mean, we're in this moment where they're talking about student loan debt forgiveness and all of this, and I'm saying, when I was in high school, going back 1,000 years ago, getting into one of the building trades apprenticeship programs was a pathway to the middle class. And I remember as a kid, everyone saying, no, you got to go to college. You can't do those kind of jobs. And yet the jobs that have done well for folks are exactly the same jobs that, the building trades jobs, those apprenticeship programs where you got in, you actually earned while you learned and didn't get saddled with a lifetime of student loan debt. Those are still viable paths. And those are paths that I would like to see more of, especially because we're in this moment, Tim, where, and as you know this better than anyone, our infrastructure is crumbling. We got so much to rebuild, so much to reinvest in, and so much of the future to build and to pursue that we're going to need people who can lay a brick or can spin a wire or can do any of those things.
Agreed. And look, when you have a trade, you don't have a job. You have a career, and that's something that was drilled into me from a young age. And earn while you learn is absolutely right. And the other component, and this is very true of our apprenticeship programs across the country, is they also receive college credit in conjunction with local universities, community colleges. So it isn't an either or. Individuals can pursue both. In fact, that's probably the wave of the future, right? I mean, you hear about the demise of the four-year degree. People need technical training and components. I think it's going to be a marriage of both of those things. It's going to be the path forward.
Real quick, I want to get back to Marty Walsh. The hope is that his confirmation goes through, because I don't think he's been confirmed yet, right?
No, they haven't scheduled this vote. The hope is, if not later this week, within the next week.
Right. I'm hoping that gets through. What are you hoping the first moves that he makes are going to be to help right the ship at the Department of Labor? Because look, I'm talking to people from the EPA. I'm talking to AFGE members, and they're saying, what they're coming across is a federal government that's been gutted and basically demolished from the inside out, and the Department of Labor being one of those as well. What are you hoping from him in his first days?
Yeah, absolutely. So look, we're in the middle of the pandemic, and it is just criminally, morally, it's bankrupt in every sense of the word that OSHA, for 4 years under Trump, had no director. Fewest amount of inspectors in the field in over 50 years. That needs immediate attention, and Marty's absolutely the person for that. He showed his leadership when the pandemic hit early in Boston. I think he's ready to bring that kind of attention that's desperately needed as we come up with some standards for how we're going to deal with, the virus. This is probably something we're going to have to live with on an ongoing basis. Certainly not without hopes of the vaccine, but the fact that this could be a new operating norm. But we also look for his leadership on things like pension reform. The Department of Labor has a key role there to play, along with Treasury and the PBGC. Marty understands the values of pensions. He's seen it take care of his relatives, how it sustains communities. He gets it. He knows that it needs to be something that we work at in a cooperative fashion going forward and not turn into a partisan football. And certainly we're looking forward to his leadership and helping make sure the PRO Act stays on the radar. And it's something that, we're going to continue to push through what other avenues, we need to.
Any chance of the PRO Act passing?
It's tough. Frankly, look, we were hopeful that we would have gotten minimum wage into the reconciliation. And the reason I say that in this context is it would have pointed to a potential path for seeing something like the PRO Act get considered in a future budget or reconciliation package. So not dead. It's a steep uphill climb. So never say die, right?
Yeah, no. It's we had Sarah Nelson on the program a week and a half ago, and she said, she thought, look, if it's dead, this is something we got to get angry about, and we've got to organize and fight and demand. So the issue's not dead. Maybe the bill might be dead for now, but it gives us something to fight for and to pursue and to rally around. And I couldn't agree with her more.
Absolutely. No, we do need to do that, and we need to make sure we're reaching out to our members and the general public on what that means and why it has value to them in the world they live in. Again, it's not a partisan football. This is the real world where people put food on their table,
yep,
have benefits for their families.
There you go. Lots of work to do, but some hope for the future. Tim, I appreciate you taking a little time for us, sharing some thoughts. Good stuff.
Rick, thanks very much. Enjoy.
Appreciate the time. Tim Driscoll, president of the International Union of Bricklayers and Allied Craft Workers. Check out their website, bacweb.org. That's bacweb.org. Quick break. Right back. Stick around. You're listening to The Rick Smith Show.
Remembering that united we bargain, divided we beg. Rick Smith.
I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1912. Nearly 1 million coal miners went on strike in Great Britain. A period of great labor unrest marked the year leading up to the massive walkout from the mines. In 1911, dock workers and railroad workers walked off the job. Overall, workers participated in more than 850 strikes. Even school children, fed up with the disciplinary practice of caning, went out on strike. Mine workers in South Wales joined the wave of strikers, but ultimately their actions were defeated. Undeterred by the setback, the Welsh miners demanded the Miners' Federation of Great Britain to take a vote among all miners on the question of establishing a national minimum wage. Up to that time, miners' pay fluctuated with the uncertainty of the coal markets. The miners resoundingly voted to take on the wage issue. They cast ballots 4-1 in favor of a national strike. Nearly 1 million miners answered the call. Alarmed, the Times declared the strike the greatest catastrophe that has threatened the country since the Spanish Armada. The owners of the White Star Line worried that their new ship, the Titanic, would have to travel at reduced speeds on her maiden voyage due to the coal shortage. They scrambled to find more coal, ultimately taking the supply from other ships to ensure their new luxury liner would meet the advertised speeds. Recognizing the impact of the miners' strike on industry and commerce, the government responded by passing a new law through Parliament, calling for a minimum wage to be set district by district. After 37 days, the strike was ended. Not all of the miners received the wages they had hoped for, but the strike had resoundingly proven the power of organized labor. Labor History in 2 brought to you by the Illinois Labor History Society and The Rick Smith Show. For more information, go to laborhistoryin2.com. Like us on Facebook and follow us on the Twitters at Labor History in 2.
I don't know if Nero really fiddled while Rome burned, but we know that Texas Senator Ted Cruz fiddled around while his state froze. While Ted fled Texas for the warmth of the Ritz-Carlton Resort in Cancun, Mexico, dozens of his constituents died in the 5-day deep freeze, and millions more suffered physically and financially. This disaster was not the result of a polar vortex, but of a small-minded vortex of right-wing political hokum that puts the interests of a few energy profiteers over the well-being of the people. Among Texans now paying the price of this political fealty to the corporate interests is a hard-hit group that gets little media notice: small local farmers. I've had the privilege of working with these hardy, innovative people since my days as Texas Agriculture Commissioner. They are America's most productive, most ecologically conscious, most community-spirited ag producers. Yet, state and national farm policies serve the industrial farm giants. For example, tens of billions of our tax dollars are paid out each year in crop insurance, but the program is not geared to the realities and needs of small, local, diversified farms, few of which get any assistance. Indeed, the bulk of payments go to those least in need, the big acreage, multi-million-dollar agribusiness operators, including Wall Street syndicates. So, such efficient enterprising farms in my area as Boggy Creek, Eden East, and Hatton Hart lost row after row of veggies to the killer storm. That means they lost the money invested to produce those crops, lost the money they would have gotten by selling them, and will have to find money from somewhere to put in a new crop. None of them will get a dime from the federal program. This is Jim Hightower saying, not only must we replace our corporate-controlled electric grid, but also our corporate-controlled ag policy and our corporate-controlled public officials. Grab a libation and join the conversation. It's the Lowdown Happy Hour at Hightower's Chat and Chew Cafe. Details and schedule at hightowerlowdown.org.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
So today, progressive organizations and leaders from across the country held a forum to push to keep the $15 an hour minimum wage in the American Rescue Plan. And again, this is one of those moments where the Senate, being all, well, as they are, prim and proper, no, we have to listen to the parliamentarian. And look, I love the fact that Bernie Sanders says we're going to have a vote on this. Damn it, we're going to do something about it. I think we need people who are willing to push, and this is where Democrats had better find a spine. But here to talk about a little bit about why we need to keep the $15 an hour minimum wage increase in the American Rescue Plan, I've asked Joe Sanberg to come talk with us. Joe is the founder of Business for Medicare for All, co-founder of Aspiration.com, also the chair and the champion of the End Poverty program with the Cal EITC program. All around, in everything, Joe Sanberg. Joe, thanks for taking time for us.
Thanks for having me, Rick.
So I'm looking at this $15 an hour minimum wage thing, which I got to be honest, I think should have been included. And I hope the Democrats will fight for it.
Yeah, I hope so too. I think this is a deal breaker issue for working people, and the president ran on this issue. We elected 2 U.S. senators in Georgia on this issue, and it's an issue that's passing in states across the country. And this is the part of the political calculus, frankly, that it's hard to understand. This is not a controversial issue among the electorate. A $15 minimum wage passed in Florida with almost 60% of the vote in November of 2020. So the states are speaking. For some reason, their U.S. senators, though, aren't reflecting the will of their electorates. It's a damn shame.
Yeah.
And I don't know what's going to happen in the federal level, but if we don't get it done federally, then we're just going to have to work in the states, one by one, past $15 minimum wages in the states.
But isn't that what a lot of conservatives are saying? This isn't a federal issue, that this should be reserved for the states to make those decisions?
Yeah, I obviously disagree.
Well, that's their
vehemently with
cop-out,
them,
but it's what they're saying.
Well, they should be careful what they wish for, because if they want to take it to the states, they're going to end up with really high minimum wages, thankfully, around the country, because everywhere, and this, I looked this up, Rick, this is a fact. In the last 10 years, every time a minimum wage hike has been on a statewide ballot, every time it's passed, every single time, including in red states like Florida and in purplish to red states like Arizona, where minimum wage hike to $12 passed a couple cycles ago. So I think it's a federal issue, but if conservatives want to take it to the states, they should think twice before we do that, because we're going to win.
Now, it's interesting to me, Mitt Romney and Tom Cotton came out with a bill that over the next 4 years they would raise the minimum wage to $10 an hour. And I find it interesting that Cotton's state of Arkansas is already, as of the first of this year, at $11 an hour. So
right.
he's not even in line with the rest of his state.
That's right. That's why I think this is such a peculiar political issue. It probably speaks again to the outsized influence of lobbyists and monopolies on Washington, D.C. politicians, because they're not reflecting the will of voters. That's for damn sure.
Now, you're a business owner. We hear from a lot of the right wing saying, look, we just can't do this, Joe. It's going to harm business owners. It's going to harm small business. We're going to put small business out of business. Do you have any sympathy for that argument?
I'm glad you asked that, because obviously I'm not a professional politician, so I can't speak firsthand to the pressures of being a U.S. Senator. I am, however, a business person who started businesses from scratch and have businesses that have employed hundreds and hundreds and sometimes thousands of people. So I can tell you what it's like to be a business person. I'm not sure a Senator Manchin can. And from my experience as a business person, I can tell you the number one thing that defines success is do your customers have money to buy your goods and services. And for 40 years, we've been wringing our hands as an economy, wondering why we can't grow faster. And the answer is simple. We have a consumer economy. 70% of the U.S. economy is based on consumption. And the people who need to buy things don't have any money. And the people who have all of the money have run out of things they need to buy. When you put more money in the pockets of workers, you put rocket fuel in the economy. And the fact is, most business people and entrepreneurs want a higher minimum wage. Very few business people I know oppose a higher minimum wage. In fact, in so many cases, we're reading about businesses that are voluntarily taking their minimum wage above the $15 level. So for everyone who's listening, please hear this clearly. As a business person myself, it's baloney that a higher minimum wage is bad for business. It's the opposite. It's one of the most pro-business, pro-economy policies that you can ever imagine, which, Rick, is part of the reason why whenever it's been on a statewide ballot the last 10 years, a higher minimum wage, every single time it's passed.
For me, I was asked, a while ago, because this has been around for a while. In fact, we had some of the first people to push for the Fight for 15 movement back in 2012 on this program. And I remember saying, look, I'm in favor of a much higher minimum wage because, I think if you went to $10 an hour, even today, those workers' lives don't get any better. Because then all what you end up having is some of the social safety net programs that some low-wage workers benefit from just get taken away, so their lives don't get better. I'm somebody who believes work has to make your life better. I've grown up believing that if you work hard, you play by the rules, you should have an opportunity to get ahead. And
that's what my mom taught me too. But you and I both know that it's proven to be an illusion for tens of millions of people. And I think that's why so many people are pissed at the state of our country right now.
Right, and which is why, again, I keep coming back to we should have a much heftier minimum wage and much stronger union rights and much higher union density. Because, when I brought up the Fight for 15 thing, it's always just the Fight for 15. It's never what it's been all along, which is fight for 15 and a union. Fight for the
Right.
strong minimum wage, but also the ability to go above and beyond that minimum wage.
Well, and I think that, to be fair, well, on one hand, I'm deeply disappointed in President Biden for his unwillingness to go to the wall for the $15 minimum wage. I also think that we have to applaud him for making one of the most pro-union statements of an American president in certainly our adult lifetimes, and that's the praise that he gave, the encouragement he gave to those who are organizing in Alabama, for the Amazon union. And you're right that we need to do a lot more in accompaniment with the push for 15 to encourage unionization and to make sure that we roll back all these anti-union laws in states throughout the country, especially in states in the South. And just for a moment on what minimum wage ought to be, you and I have talked about this before, Rick, and I think worth repeating. If the minimum wage had grown at the rate of productivity since 1960, it would be $23 today.
Yep.
So 15, when we say 15 is the floor, when we say 15 is compromise, that's not political rhetoric that we're pulling out of our sleeve. That's born of the hardcore of math. The minimum wage ought to be 23. And in a couple of years, that productivity growth benchmark is going to mean it ought to be 25 and 27 and 29. So to say 15 is the floor, that's just a matter of math.
No, I'm right there with you. But, the thing that I find interesting is, John Thune, the number 2 person in the Senate, went on this spiel, last week about how when he started for $1 an hour, which couldn't possibly be true because he's not old enough for the minimum wage to have been only $1 an hour. But he said in the 70s he was making $6 an hour, which at that time would have been something like $24 an hour today. So I'm like, yeah, give me that.
Absolutely. And again, it really idiosyncratically seems to be these elected officials in Washington, D.C. that don't understand it, because I'd return to this fact. Every time we put a higher minimum wage on a statewide ballot, it wins, including in red states. For example, let's take Florida for a second. Senator Rubio ought to consider the fact that 60% of Floridians in November voted for a $15 minimum wage. Now, whatever you think about Marco Rubio, he wants to get reelected. How does he not see this is a massively popular issue? I truly don't get it, other than just the death grip that lobbyists and monopolies have on these senators.
Yeah, I mean, and again, what's happened over the years is, thanks to Reaganomics, thanks to all of the assaults on unions, and thanks to this idea that we have to stranglehold any inflation, we've kept wages down to the point to where they've stopped growing, and the standard of living of the average American has gone backwards. And I talk about myself. I've done fairly well for myself over the years, but when I started working, the wage that I began working at was like $14 an hour back in the late 80s, which had it just kept up to inflation today would be close to 30. And when I got to top rate, that would have been close to $38 an hour in today's wages. Those wages are nowhere close to that. And this is where I keep coming back to. We need to have the strong unions pushing for those wage increases along with a strong bottom.
Well, I consider how everything that we need to get by in life has gone up so much in price. And here's what's really a dirty little secret. The statistics say there's no inflation. But here's what's really happened. The price of television, phones, electronics have gone down a lot in price. But the price of education, healthcare, rent, and food, life's basic needs, what's the core part of being a middle-class American, have all gone up a ton in price.
Yeah.
And so you look at these overall inflation figures for the last 30 or 40 years, and they seem like they're mild. But the things that middle-income and working-class people need to enjoy upward mobility in American society again, like education, healthcare, food, rent, those things have gone up 10, 15% a year for 30 years. So great, everyone can have cheap smartphones and cheap flat screen TVs. There's nothing wrong with enjoying, our football or basketball or baseball on a good flat screen TV. I'm all for it. But more importantly is everyone needs to be able to afford education, healthcare, food, and rent. And so the toxic mix is the purchasing power of the minimum wage has fallen even farther behind than what the statistics say because of those four areas I mentioned that have gone up so much in cost.
Right. So let me ask you this now. As I've been reading some of the activist groups, their positions and some of the statistics that are out there, it seems to me in the research that I've done that most of the average minimum wage worker is not the pimply faced teenager that we're led to believe, but overwhelmingly single mothers. Who are the family's breadwinner. So do you think that has something to do with the fact that this doesn't seem to be politically an urgent issue for our senators and our high court there?
It could be. I think that people need to know 2 out of 3 minimum wage workers are women. So when we talk about the gender wage gap in the United States, when you raise the minimum wage, you're arguably doing more than any single policy change could do to close the gender wage gap. The gender wage gap falls most perniciously on the shoulders of low-income women and low-income single moms. And yeah, I bet you're right that if disproportionately the minimum wage was earned by men, you'd hear a lot more about it because, as we know, women are sold short so often in our economy and our society.
Yeah, because I've had a number of people, a number of my work friends go, I don't make minimum wage. They should, get different jobs or they should get better education or there are all these excuses. And I keep coming back to, how much is your time worth? In this country, we have a poverty line. The poverty line for a single mother is $17,240. The minimum wage is only $15,000. How do you have a minimum wage that even if you do what you're supposed to do, and that's show up and punch a clock for 40 hours a week, 52 weeks a year, you're still below the poverty line?
Who wants to live in a country where people who are working full-time live in poverty? Who
I
wants
don't.
to live in that kind of society? No one. I don't think any reasonable person does, and I include in that most Republicans, which, by the way, I think is why every time a higher minimum wage is put on the statewide ballot, it passes.
Right.
Because I think this notion that if you work full-time, you shouldn't live in poverty is actually something that resonates across political ideology. Unfortunately, it doesn't seem to resonate with our U.S. Senate, but among voters, I think it's something that a lot of Republicans agree with almost every Democrat on.
So today you were involved with a number of other organizations, Representative Lee, Representative Tlaib, Representative Khanna. We've had on the program a bunch of times, 11, a bunch of progressive organizations calling for the $15 an hour to be kept in. What was the marching order? What came out of that? What do you want folks to do?
Well, I think there's a few different marching orders for everyone listening. Call your member of Congress and especially call your U.S. Senator. Because let's be clear, that's where it's being held up. The U.S. House of Representatives and Speaker Pelosi have done their job for working people. This is something that's being delayed by the U.S. Senate and by a lot of Democrats in the U.S. Senate in particular. So call your senator, call the White House, call your member of Congress, take to social media, and get ready to organize in 22 because we may need to go to the states to get the higher minimum wage for everyone.
No.
If that's what we're forced to do, then that's what we're going to have to do. We're going to get a living wage, no matter how long it takes, no matter what we have to do. My charge to everyone is we have to use all democratic means necessary. So we're not going to be deterred by some unelected parliamentarian. If we have to go to every single state in this country and put a ballot in front of the electorate every single state, and even if it takes many cycles, that's what we're going to do.
That's what you're going to do. Last question I've got for you. This vote is coming soon. How much time are we going to have before? I mean, obviously we won't be making these calls. We want to put pressure on. How much time do you see this window being?
Not long. could be a matter of days.
So call immediately, if not sooner. I guess that's the message.
That's right.
But Joe, I appreciate the time. It's always good talking with you, my friend.
Thank you very much for having me, Rick.
Always good talking to Joe Sanberg. No, I mean, call early, call often. Look, this seems like a no-brainer. As he pointed out, and everywhere that's on the ballot, it wins. Except here in Pennsylvania, where we couldn't even get 875 over 3 years out of a Republican-led legislature. I keep coming back to that. Scott Wagner, the guy who got crushed in the last gubernatorial election, he actually proposed an 875 minimum wage a couple years back. I think it was 50-cent increases for 3 years. They couldn't even get that through. Sad stuff. I'm going to take a quick break. Right back. Stick around.
Saving work in America, one show at a time. The Rick Smith Show.
I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1936. That was the day Hoover Dam was formally turned over to the federal government. It was a massive undertaking. Approved by the Coolidge administration in 1928, work began to divert and then dam the Colorado River in 1931, creating Lake Mead. Thousands of unemployed flocked to the area in search of jobs. More than 21,000 were employed over the course of 5 years, with as many as 5,200 working on any given day. Workers were paid on average of 50 cents an hour, with higher pay for skilled work. Governmental hiring terms included preference to veterans and no hiring of Asians. The Colored Citizens Labor and Protective Association of Las Vegas protested de facto hiring discrimination against blacks. Their eventual representation among the employed totaled an estimated 24 to 30 for the duration of the project. A few Native Americans were hired as high scalers to remove loose rock with jackhammers and dynamite. Estimated fatalities ranged from 96 to over 150. Many died from falls, heat-related illnesses, falling debris, heavy equipment, and carbon monoxide poisoning from tunnel work. The project was rocked by at least 2 documented strikes. The industrial workers of the world attempted to organize there. Workers struck over wage cuts and working conditions. They repeatedly demanded flushing toilets and cold, clean running water, especially in temperatures as high as 120 degrees in the summertime. At the time the Hoover Dam was turned over to the federal government, it was the tallest dam and the largest hydroelectric station in the country. It currently generates about 4 billion kilowatt hours of hydroelectric power for Nevada, Arizona, and California. Like what you hear? Check out more at laborhistoryin2.com.
Welcome back to The Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
So it's going to be a short order before this happens, and like I said earlier, Bernie Sanders is saying, "Look, we got to get a vote on this." He said that they shouldn't be listening to a parliamentarian; they should be moving on this. The country's in an enormous crisis. We're in a moment of desperation for working families. He said it's we shouldn't have a Senate staffer holding this up, and I agree with that. And this is where. I come back to where, Democrats have been viewed as not willing to fight. We're going to listen to the staffer instead of going, we got to get things done. If the Republicans had a plan, and this is one of those moments where I'm still waiting for it. I'm still waiting for their policies. I'm still waiting for their ideas to come out, if they have any. If you watched CPAC, there was nothing to address the massive inequality in this country. There was nothing to stop the stagnant wages. And understand, I just think about in my lifetime, I started working, In fact, I just had this conversation this afternoon. A buddy of mine started working in 1979. He was making $10.10 an hour in 1979. At the time, that was like $38 an hour in today's dollars. He was working in the freight business. When I started, a couple years later, a decade later, he started off at 14, went up to 18. That was the same thing. It was like $38 an hour at the top rate in today's dollars. The best health care you could get, a defined benefit pension, and paid sick days, vacation, all of those things, overtime after 8 hours, all things that at the time were the norms. Fast forward today, same exact job. Now top rate pays $25 an hour, not 38. So somewhere that $13 an hour went. And we know where it went. It went to the investors. It went to the CEOs. It went to the wealthy. It was a massive redistribution of wealth. And I've been saying for a very long time that part of raising the minimum wage, part of giving people the right to join and form unions and to negotiate for better wages, brings us back to a time where we can actually win better wages. Life can get better for a lot of people. And even the minimum wage, had it kept up with inflation from 1968, just inflation, it'd have been like $12.50. So if they did nothing and just tied it to inflation, by now it'd be $12.50. That is not below the minimum, below the poverty line. I think everyone can agree, or at least I hope everyone can agree, that anyone who works shouldn't be in poverty. I know it's a huge leap, but I think everyone agrees with that. That if you're going and you're doing your thing, no matter what it is, that we should have respect for that job, respect for the person doing it, and that respect should come in the form of being able to make their own way. And as I said to Joe, I don't believe that we should go halfway. Half measures aren't going to cut it. A $10 an hour minimum wage only breaks even for people. Because the right wing loves to tell us that there's this benefits cliff, that those lazy people, they'll never work until they get over. The solution to all of this for me, and it's always been the solution where I think conservatives could come on board. Jack that minimum wage up to $15. Now nobody needs school lunch programs or LIHEAP or rent assistance or any of that stuff. Those programs are no longer needed for working people. We make our federal government the employer of last resort so that everyone has a job, and we get rid of all of the food stamp programs, all of the dehumanizing programs that are out there that people have to go with their hat in hand and begging for. You should never have to beg for things. Your work should be able to fund your existence. And there's pride that comes with work, self-esteem that comes with work, lots of good things. And that competition, this is where I love my conservatives, competition between that public job working for the federal government or for the state governments, doing all of the things that aren't being done now, like maybe taking care of a senior, maybe, who knows, caulking windows. There's tons of stuff. We got thousands of things that could be done. Or those private sector jobs. If the private sector wants to compete for better people, they're going to have to pay better wages. I was talking to a union buddy of mine who was saying, the freight industry, the freight jobs, they can't get people. They can't come work on the dock for $25.75 an hour. If you wanted a job making $25.75 an hour, I can get that for you. Not that hard. But they can't get people to take the job. Why? Well, because it's not that great of money anymore. Nobody wants to stand out in the cold and freeze, and nobody wants to sweat in the summertime. We're not that society anymore. So and look, I wouldn't have done it for minimum wage either 30 years ago. The reason I did it was $38 an hour in today's dollars back then. It was a damn good living. You were compensated well for the work that you did. That's how you get people to come in the door. You pay them well. Something I think business has forgotten because they've gotten so addicted to cheap labor. They've gotten so addicted to exploitable labor. Which is why, again, I keep coming back to the main point. I'm hoping during this administration, we do get some legislation that helps making organizing easier, like it was for our grandparents. I hope we do get some move forward that helps us rebuild our economy and rebuild our infrastructure. We need it desperately. Because if we don't do things, all we're going to hear from the Republicans is how bad Joe Biden is and how he didn't do anything, and how nothing got through the Senate, even though it was Mitch McConnell and every one of those Republican senators who held it up. So we got lots of work to do. But as Joe said, make sure you call your senator, call them early, call them often. Let's take a quick break. When we come back, our good friend Bob Ney is going to be here to share some thoughts on the top news of the day. Right back after this.
Waving the flag of freedom for people, not corporations. Rick Smith.
I am committed to working cooperatively with all stakeholders and all of Congress to strike the right balance going forward.
Historic Interior Department nominee pledges balance amid GOP attacks. New Postal Service trucks won't be all electric. Texas deregulation cost electricity customers $28 billion. Plus,
data show the pollutants include tens of thousands of pounds of benzene, carbon monoxide, hydrogen sulfide, and sulfur dioxide.
Refineries legally released tons of toxic pollution during Texas power crisis.
Someone should make a law about that. All of those stories and more straight ahead from BradBlog.com. I'm Brad Friedman.
And I'm Desi Doyen.
Stand by for 6 minutes of independent green news, politics, analysis, and snarky comment.
Did Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez 10 years ago at the tender age of 21 parachute into the state of Texas to put up windmills under cover of night?
Probably.
Or she and Al Gore driving through the Permian Basin, secretly unplugging all the rigs? How stupid does Tucker think his audience is?
How much time you got, Chris Hayes? This is your Green News Report. Okay, Desi Doyen, I hate to say it, but more trouble in Texas.
Oh, indeed there is. First, another bomb train explosion, this time in Cameron, Texas, near Austin. The good news is that no one was injured. An 18-wheeler hit a train carrying gasoline, coal, and petroleum products on Tuesday, triggering a huge explosion and fire that officials say will take days to put out. Also in Texas, more fallout from the Texas power crisis and water crisis, as 6 members of ERCOT, the Texas electric grid operator, resigned this week over the catastrophic, deadly failure of the state's unregulated power system in a winter storm that left millions without heat or electricity.
Sure, fire the board members who were following Texas law.
Exactly. Critics say that state Republican lawmakers are responsible. They knew what kind of system they had, and they embraced it until it failed.
You gotta blame someone other than yourself if you're a Republican.
Plus, a Wall Street Journal analysis has found that thanks to deregulation and privatization of the state's electricity market, Texans have actually paid $28 billion more for their electricity since 2004 than they would have otherwise under a traditional regulated utility structure.
Free market, baby. Free market for suckers.
And adding insult to injury, the Texas crisis also led to more air pollution. Refineries and petrochemical plants scrambled to shut production during the sub-freezing weather, forcing them to flare or burn off gases to prevent damage to the units. According to state data, the 5 largest oil refineries in the U.S. legally released toxic benzene, carbon monoxide, hydrogen sulfide, and sulfur dioxide into the air, generating clouds of pollution across the East Texas region. Environmental groups say the pollution releases could have been prevented if the plants had been winterized.
Hey, it wouldn't be Texas if they weren't allowed to pollute.
President Joe Biden's nominee for Interior Secretary, Democratic Representative Deb Haaland of New Mexico, appears to be headed to confirmation as the first ever Native American cabinet secretary in U.S. history. In Senate confirmation hearings this week, fossil fuel-funded Republicans labeled Haaland a radical over her pledges to protect tribal communities and public lands and over her opposition to controversial pipelines on native lands. They even lectured Holland about the importance of science in decision-making after spending the last 4 years backing the Trump administration's war on science and data. Holland said that fossil energy plays a major role in America and repeatedly emphasized that if confirmed, she will work to bridge party lines to find balance with Biden's climate agenda.
As part of this balance, the department has a role in harnessing the clean energy potential of our public lands and to create jobs and new economic opportunities. The president's agenda demonstrates that America's public lands can and should be engines for clean energy production.
Also in the nation's capital, the Biden Department of Energy is moving ahead with a sweeping review of Trump administration energy rules, including a review of several of the Trump administration's most controversial moves in preparation for a possible reversal of policies that weakened energy and water efficiency regulations for light bulbs, shower heads, dishwashers, and more.
God, that was a dumb administration.
Finally, the U.S. Postal Service has unveiled a futuristic design for new postal trucks. But U.S. Postmaster General Louis DeJoy told lawmakers this week that the service would only commit to making 10% of more than 100,000 new postal trucks all electric, citing the cost. All electric delivery trucks would save the Postal Service more than $100 million a year in gasoline costs alone. DeJoy's move seems to defy President Biden's pledge to replace the U.S. government's fleet with all electric vehicles.
What about his pledge to replace Louis DeJoy? Hope that's coming soon. For much more on all of these stories and the ones we couldn't get to today, please check out our website at greennews.bradblog.com. Find, follow, and share us planet-wide on the Facebooks and the Twitters at Green News Report. I'm Brad Friedman.
And I'm Desi Doyen.
Happy birthday.
Thank you.
This has been your Green News Report.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
So, interesting story coming out of New Orleans. Evidently, the Archdiocese of the Catholic Church there in New Orleans is saying, don't get the Johnson & Johnson vaccine. Nope, they're very angry. Evidently, they're claiming that it was made with, originally back in the 70s, is what they're saying. The original cells that they used originated from aborted fetuses from the 1970s. So they're saying, don't do it. It's morally compromised. And this is where the weird caveat is. Evidently, all of them are used with the same kind of stem cells. Only Johnson & Johnson is, well, worse somehow. So interesting how they pick and choose. Anyway, here to share some thoughts on the top stories of the day. Also, maybe get some thoughts on the golden Trump doll from Sunday. I've asked our good friend Bob Ney, former Ohio congressman and political advisor, analyst, smart guy, to come talk with us. Bob, thanks for taking time for us.
Oh, you so overrated me. Hi, how are you?
I am good. What do you think of the golden calf, the golden Bob's Big Boy character? What do you think of it?
I was speechless. I'm not going to bid on it. The artist wants $1 million. Did you see that?
It's up to $1 million. It was $100,000 a little while ago.
He said that it would be worth $1 million, but he said he would take $100,000.
Okay.
Right.
I wouldn't pay 50 cents.
You know, this was interesting because when I first saw it, I thought it was the creation of somebody, that was running CPAC. And then I saw where this artist came up with this and used his life savings of $50,000 to make this 6-foot tall, undisputable star, as they call it, a statue. And then he was trying to hawk it. He thought it was worth $1 million, but he said if somebody offered him $100,000, he'd take it. His name's Zegan, and he made it. As you know, he made it in Mexico. You saw that, right?
Yeah, I wasn't gonna.
Oh, I'm gonna bring it up. He made it in Mexico.
Yeah, the absurdity of the whole.
It's Trump,
Well, he did carry it over the wall, though.
Well, yeah, but the question is, did he bring it over? legally, or does it have papers, or what? I mean, you got to ask that. It's the
that is an
golden
excellent,
calf.
Yeah, it's an excellent question.
It did stir some religious people to go back to the biblical days of the golden calf that was made. So I know that.
Of course it did, but it didn't seem to bother anyone there at CPAC. I mean, they were all smiles, taking pictures with the guy with the wand, the magic wand.
It was so gaudy. But I actually did think maybe they had created it at CPAC, but it was created by this artist and then allowed to be brought there and put on display and taken pictures and things. I wonder if Ted Cruz took a picture.
No, I'm not going to say it. I'm not going to say that they found him kissing its behind.
Yeah, well, he see there it is. If Ted Cruz was smart, he went down to Mexico to look at that statue to pre-approve it. There you go. Now that would have helped his.
That would have
cause.
helped. I think that have bought him some love from that crowd.
Oh, by the way, the Cancun joke bombed. Even at CPAC, it bombed.
As it should have. And then he went and attacked AOC again, and you go, look, dude,
right.
Bad comparison. A joke about Bernie and the mittens, maybe. No, not even Bernie and the mittens, because, look, your constituents didn't have mittens. There are people who got frostbite and you went off to Cancun.
Mm-hmm. Oh, yeah, it was kind of, well, as you know, he came out with 2%.
Yeah, he was still fifth, though.
Rick, you could have spoken and came out of there with 2%, okay? I'm telling you.
Yeah.
Well, maybe 1%. Right behind Ted.
Yeah, no, that's crazy. So what did you think of Trump's speech? I mean, there was nothing there for me, but I'm curious. Grade?
Very. I think in Trump tradition, if you have to rate it, first speech after the presidency, post presidency, it was mild. It really was. He hammered over a couple of old things, and then made it clear he wasn't going to start his own party, which was the biggest revelation of the night. No, I didn't think it was an electric, here I am again speech.
It's very low energy, low energy.
Right.
And as I've been saying, it's kind of like going to see an old comedian who hasn't got any new jokes, and you could probably tell the jokes better than they can. That's kind of the feeling I got from him. It was the same tired material that I thought could have been delivered by anybody else better.
Right. Yes, and also now people will scoff at this, but he came out only with 68% out of CPAC. Now the reason I say that, I'm sorry, but it's Trump, it's CPAC. Would you honestly not have thought it would have been higher than 68? I would have.
Yeah, I mean, so where's the 55% number at?
I don't know.
Because originally, what I saw was 55% would vote for him for president in 2024.
Oh yeah.
21% was for DeSantis, and then it was down, plummeted from there. But so, is that the same number?
I heard the 68% today when I was talking on Wisconsin radio. Okay. So that's what I heard.
Yeah, because there was the 55% number, but when they do you want him to run, that number jumped up. So
that must be
it could be wanting him to run as opposed to voting for him for running.
Right, or acceptance, 55% acceptance. Yes, that's what you're right. 68% want him to run again, and I still think that's low for Trump at CPAC.
Yeah, I mean I watched it and I'm going, CPAC, how far thou hath fallen. I mean, this was, at one point, this is where you came for new ideas. This is where the conservative elite, floated their ideas. Now it's just, wow. It was like a loony bin.
Well, there was nothing of ideas out of this. And you're right, it used to be at CPAC, because, I've covered different events. I've covered CPAC. I've covered what I would now call, progressive conferences. But with CPAC, they would, in the past, bring, people that would bring forth an idea, a mantra, ideas for legislation, etc. And this just turned a complete different direction.
Yeah, but then again, nothing really there anyway. I wanted to get your thoughts on Tammy Duckworth has now called on Joe Biden to release all of the intel with the alleged Russian bounties on troops in Afghanistan. I think that's going to happen.
I don't know if it will. I think she's on to something. Why not release that intel? And also, I'd still like to see even more intel on the Saudis and the 3,000 some people that died in 9/11. I'd like to see some more of that intel, especially of how the government went after the investigation into the Saudis and the embassy. And I think also that there's no reason not to release the intel on the Russians. Now, I understand how they gathered it can't be released. That's fully understandable. But what they gathered could be released. Why not?
Yeah, I mean, this is one of those moments where, I have a lot of people who keep telling me, wow, that whole Russia thing was a hoax. And I'm going, no, it wasn't. And I think this is one of those moments where there's got to be some of that comes out. What exactly Russia has been doing over the last, couple of decades. And if this is true, that they did put bounties on the heads, and I'm told that it's true, we should be able to see the evidence that points that out.
Well, again, I think the 911, look, when President Trump was going to release some information, on the Kennedy assassination, JFK assassination, the government came out and said, well, there's some matters of national security. Tell me what in the 60s they did with the CIA that we did, that is so important that's used today.
Yeah.
This is all a smokescreen. I think they ought to release a lot of information. Now, that doesn't mean that you release how you acquired it, because then that gives up some of our ability to acquire future information.
Yeah,
or obviously sources that are hidden within Russia that we don't want to reveal because they'll be killed, or we can't use them. But I think that the information itself, why not release it? I mean, it's a good question. Did they do that? Did they put the bounties?
Yeah, I mean, but on the JFK stuff, there's nobody alive yet.
Right.
There are no spies left. They're all gone.
Right.
We should know. But the sad reality, and this is where my mind goes with this, we did a lot of horrible stuff that we don't want out. We have a history that's not as pristine as we'd like to believe.
Correct.
And it would further, again, we're at one of these moments where everything of the past is being re-examined and thrown out. I mean, I look at the fact that today I saw Dr. Seuss is no longer on the reading list because of the racist things that he, cartoons he drew back in the 30s. We seem to be canceling everything, and some things for good causes. But I don't think that should stop us from wanting to know what happened.
Well, it shouldn't. I mean, it should be revealed. And my pet peeve of all is the people who lied to us. What did they tell? Why did they tell it? Not where they got the sources from as much as what did they actually tell. Then how was it verified? And I'm talking about the Iraq War.
Yeah. Is there any movement to do that? Is there any push?
No, none. I mean, neither side wanted to dig into it. It's like, oh, well, it happened. And that's like members of Congress who voted, as I did at the time, to allow full faith of the ability of George Bush to decide, to go into war or not. And then later people said, well, Saddam was a bad guy. Well, my answer to that is, so is the premier of China.
Right.
Would have done better to have invaded Beijing, frankly. At least we'd have got some jobs back.
There is that.
Yeah, I'm not running on that platform. I'm just...
Yeah, that would be a tough one.
Yeah. Well, maybe not in parts of Ohio, but...
Well, maybe not. I mean, that's always been a very interesting state. Let's move along. Evidently, Andrew Cuomo's got himself in a twist.
Yeah.
Now another allegation, a third. You got Nancy Pelosi saying that the allegations are credible. What's this mean for Cuomo?
Well, I think he's in severe trouble. At first, there was verbal, then there were some other accusations. Now, I think the toughest thing for him right now is that Congresswoman Rice of New York has come out and said he needs to resign. And what I mean by that, if you look at Al Franken, who, frankly, I do believe never had his day before the Ethics Committee and should have had his day before the Ethics Committee. He really should. I think he should have. But because that's what he wanted to do. But, you know, one member came out against him from New York, and then the rest was history. So as Congresswoman Rice comes out now from New York and says you need to resign, if others jump aboard, he can't survive that. He simply can't survive it.
Yeah, I mean, it's one of those things, and I keep coming back to, because you're one of the first people I had heard put it this way: the media loves building you up, just so they can tear you down,
rip you down. Oh yeah, and I think for example, with AOC, not that they have ripped her down, but they put her to such a level and then dropped her like a hot potato. I mean, because that's what they do, and they'll do it with other people. I mean, Cuomo was purported to be out there as maybe, you know, running for president. And, you know, I mean, I don't know what he did or he didn't do, but once this starts where, especially a member of Congress calls for your resignation, if others jump aboard, and I use, again, Al Franken as the example where I would still defend his right at that time when others, including Republicans, were not asked to resign, but due to, you know, the pile-on in the media, he resigned before he had his hearing day.
Yeah, I was against the idea of him resigning the way he did.
Right.
You should have had the hearing.
Sure.
And you know, this is one of those, you know, those weird moments where, you know, at what point is his harassment, is all of this stuff, does it rise to that level? Because I didn't think what Franken did was absolutely horrible. They were on a joking tour. It wasn't right. It was wrong, and there's no question about that. But I don't know that it rose to the level of destroying his career.
Well, that's true. And also there are points, if you go back in Congress, I mean, I can recall conversations as anybody can. If you go back in Congress at some point in time, you know, 20 years ago, things were said, including females saying things to males. I'm not saying they sexually harass them, but things would be said, and there was a lot of joking nature, things that today are totally unacceptable. But if you go back at that period of time and bring this all out, and somebody's still there, they're not going to survive it, you know, most likely.
Yeah.
So also the context of it, like with Franken and the joke tour, you know, the context of it and the day. Not to say that anything like that is appropriate, and the times have certainly changed for the better, but the context of what was said when it was said, I think has some validity to it, you know.
No, we'll see what happens to him. I think he's might as well. I think he's
done.
I
think he's doomed with Congresswoman Rice particularly coming out, and the Speaker. You know, but I think with the Congresswoman from New York, Democratic, coming out and saying that, I think he's doomed.
I think he's doomed. I didn't think he did an overly great job on the virus stuff early on. I think there's a lot of problems going to be coming out about that, but this just compounds it. And finally, wanted to get your thoughts on Joe Biden's statement on Sunday. His support for unions and support for the Amazon vote. Any thoughts on Biden's little 2-minute spiel?
Well, I personally loved it. You know, a bone to pick is Amazon doesn't pay taxes, which I think is absolutely, you know, disgusting. But as far as, you know, what I hear from friends and some friends who have you know, worked at Amazon, who talk about the warehouse conditions and how bad it is, I thought it was great. And the fact that he came out as the president, and even though it was a 2-minute video, and he didn't name, you know, Amazon specifically, but what he came out to do, I think, was very good. He talked about workers and voting whether to organize a union in their workplace, and it's a vitally important choice on it. Whether they unionize or not, that's up to them. They should have a free and fair choice, as he said, to join a union. I thought it was big.
Yeah, I think it's one of those political statements in a moment when, you know, the attacks are coming fast and furious at unions and workers, for him to come out and with the courage to do that. That's you know, as I tweeted out, that's the reason I voted for him right there.
Right. I thought it was great. I thought it was a very significant 2 minutes that gave a lot of life and breath to, and not just Amazon, but for the ability, with when we've got these workers that are all scattered into Uber, and they can't really be bargained, because they're everywhere. You know how that runs with, for example, Uber. But in this case, Amazon's the giant, and the fact that the president supports a free choice within that corporation, as any corporation, I think it's a big deal.
No, I do too. Bob, I appreciate the time. As always, good stuff, my friend.
Okay, thank you.
Good stuff. Our good friend Bob Ney. Let's take a quick break. Right back to wrap things up. Stick around. You're listening to The Rick Smith Show.
Saving work in America, one show at a time. The Rick Smith Show.
I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1900. That was the day the members of the Granite Cutters National Union walked out on strike. Their demands were improved wages and the 8-hour day. The leader of the strike was James Duncan, a Scottish granite cutter. Duncan had been elected granite cutter president in 1885. He was one of the founders of the American Federation of Labor. He served on the AFL's executive committee and was a close personal advisor of AFL President Samuel Gompers. Most of the granite cutters were located in cities on the East Coast. The union's first local was founded in Maine in 1877. Like many skilled trade unions of its day, under Duncan's leadership, the organization did not welcome black members. Duncan actively encouraged employers in the South to hire only white granite cutters. The strike of 1900 lasted until mid-May. It ended with a victory for the union, including the 8-hour workday for every local of granite cutters. Because their skills were often in high demand, trade craft unions were sometimes able to win concessions from employers on matters of wages, hours, and working conditions. These victories by skilled craftsmen helped pave the way for the 8-hour workday to become the standard workday for all working people in the United States. The union also won a minimum wage standard and grievance procedure. In 1905, the Granite Cutters changed their name to the Granite Cutters International Union. During the 20th century, changes in technology changed the labor of granite cutting. Machines reduced the number of workers. In the 1920s, the union had more than 10,000 members. But by the late 1970s, it had dropped to less than 4,000 members. Labor History in 2 brought to you by the Illinois Labor History Society and The Rick Smith Show.
Welcome back to The Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
So tomorrow on the program, I'm going to have comedian Steve Hofstetter on. I think he's hysterical. Also, our good friend Scott Paul from the Alliance for American Manufacturing and Philly District Attorney Larry Krasner. Also, Stephen Donziger. He is an environmental attorney and U.S. political prisoner. I mean, the reality is what it is. This is the guy who starting in 1993, began suing Texaco and eventually Chevron for, I think the decision was like $20 billion or something against Chevron for all of the things that they had done in Ecuador. And there was a documentary done, I think back in 2008, 2009, about what happened in Ecuador. And just the horrible conditions, the people dying of just all these cancers, all because, Texaco / Chevron, was drilling there. And what was interesting is, they got a Chevron person to come out and say, no, we would never do any of that stuff. It's all because they have bad sanitation. That's why they all have leukemia. And this guy, he fought and he won. He fought the David and Goliath, battle and won in Ecuador, where Texaco Chevron wanted the case to be. So when they lost, they wanted to transfer it back to the U.S., filed RICO charges against them, and it's just this horrible tale of corporate power gone awry. And now this guy's been under house arrest for like 570 days over a chumped up contempt charge that the local prosecutor refused to pursue. They brought in a private firm to prosecute it. They've had him under house arrest this entire time. And his story is one of those that I think has to be told. And now there's a big movement to free Stephen Donziger. So tomorrow he'll be on the program sharing some of his thoughts. And this is one of those interviews that I think are really important, which is why I'm pushing it. I hope you'll tune in tomorrow. But if you missed any of today's program, thericksmithshow.com. That's where you go to get the podcast. The Rick Smith Show app on the smartphone. Take the program on the go wherever you go. And as always, you can email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com. Love to hear your thoughts, questions, comments, anything that's on your mind. Thanks so much for being here. We'll see you back here next time.
You've been listening to The Rick Smith Show. Email Rick at rick@thericksmithshow.com. Until next time, this has been The Rick Smith Show, where working people come to talk.